Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941, was Nazi Germany's bold and massive invasion of the Soviet Union, and it changed the course of World War II forever. Fueled by Hitler's ambition to dominate all of Europe, more than 3 million German troops stormed across the Soviet border at dawn, beginning the largest military invasion in human history. In those first weeks, it seemed that nothing could stop the relentless advance of German tanks and infantry. As hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers were captured and enormous territories rapidly fell. Yet, despite these dramatic early victories, Barbarossa became one of history's greatest military disasters. Hitler's downfall in the East was caused not by chance, but by severe strategic mistakes. Overconfidence, poor preparation, logistical chaos, and a deep underestimation of Soviet determination. These errors ultimately shattered Germany's dream of conquest. One of Hitler's biggest mistakes was severely underestimating the Soviet Union's military strength. Before Operation Barbarossa began, Nazi intelligence painted a dangerously inaccurate picture, convincing Hitler and his generals that Stalin's brutal purges had crippled Soviet military leadership, leaving the Red Army weak, frightened, and poorly organized. The Soviets' earlier struggle against tiny Finland during the Winter War seemed to confirm this false assumption, leading Germany to believe a swift victory was inevitable. Yet, when German troops crossed the border, they quickly encountered a shocking reality. Soviet soldiers fought relentlessly, often refusing to retreat or surrender, driven by fierce patriotism and fear of Nazi atrocities. But the biggest shock came from advanced Soviet weaponry, especially tanks like the T-34 and the heavily armored KV-1D. These machines were vastly superior to anything the Germans expected, deflecting standard anti-tank shells easily and causing panic among Wehrmacht commanders. German soldiers suddenly found themselves improvising desperately on the battlefield, forced into difficult engagements against armor they had no effective means to stop. Instead of a quick triumph, the German advance was significantly slowed, turning confidence into confusion and doubt among commanders who had expected an easy victory. Secondly, Hitler set overly ambitious military goals which severely weakened his army's ability to fight effectively. Even before Operation Barbarossa began, many experienced German generals warned Hitler that spreading their limited resources across multiple distant objectives would be disastrous. Yet Hitler ignored this advice, convinced that his armies were unstoppable. He insisted on launching a massive three-pronged assault, attacking Moscow, Leningrad, and Kiev simultaneously. Each city was important, Leningrad for its symbolic and industrial significance, Kiev for its crucial economic resources, and Moscow as the Soviet Union's political and logistical heart. But by attempting to seize all three at once, the German army stretched itself dangerously thin, straining supply lines to the breaking point and making decisive breakthroughs impossible. Generals like Heinz Guderian strongly recommended focusing solely on Moscow, believing its capture would cripple Soviet command and morale. However, Hitler stubbornly prioritized economic gains and symbolic victories. This strategic indecision caused critical delays. While German forces paused, changed directions, and lost momentum, the Soviets seized every chance to reorganize and strengthen their defenses. Opportunities for quick victories turned into drawn-out, exhausting battles, ultimately weakening Germany's entire Eastern Front. Further intensifying these strategic mistakes were critical logistical oversights. German military planners, accustomed to the well-developed roads and compact geography of Western Europe, failed to grasp the vastness and harsh terrain of the Soviet Union. As German forces pushed deeper into enemy territory, their supply lines became dangerously overstretched, making it increasingly difficult to deliver essentials like fuel, ammunition, and food. Frontline soldiers frequently found themselves stranded, desperately awaiting supplies that often never arrived. This slowed their advance significantly and left troops highly vulnerable. The image of the Nazi propaganda shows a captured Soviet armored train on the Eastern Front/Russia, 28 November, 1941. Another critical logistical oversight was the difference in railway gauges. Soviet railways were wider than German ones, meaning trains could simply continue eastward. Instead, German engineers had to reconstruct thousands of miles of railway track as fighting continued all around them, wasting precious time, manpower, and resources. These unforeseen logistical nightmares dramatically reduced the momentum of the invasion. By late summer and early autumn, Germany's supply system was nearing collapse, leaving countless soldiers stranded deep inside Soviet territory, isolated, poorly supplied, and dangerously unprepared for the approaching winter. Perhaps the clearest example of Hitler's catastrophic miscalculations during Operation Barbarossa was Germany's complete failure to prepare for the brutal Russian winter. Hitler, confident his powerful blitzkrieg tactics would secure victory within months, ignored the urgent need for winter clothing, adequate shelters, and specialized equipment. As temperatures plummeted far below freezing, German troops, still wearing thin summer uniforms, faced unimaginable suffering. Frostbite spread quickly among the ranks, costing soldiers their fingers, toes, and sometimes their lives. Tanks, trucks, and other vital machinery also became useless in the extreme cold, as engines froze solid and lubricants hardened. Even critical artillery pieces failed, unable to fire or move. Meanwhile, the Soviet army, well prepared and thoroughly equipped for winter combat, seized this opportunity to launch devastating counterattacks. Rather than merely a season, winter became one of Germany's fiercest enemies, ruthlessly exposing Hitler's disastrous strategic oversight in leaving his forces stranded, vulnerable, and demoralized. Finally, internal command conflict severely weakened Germany's military strategy, becoming a decisive factor in Operation Barbarossa's collapse. At the heart of these conflicts stood Hitler himself, whose constant interference and refusal to listen to his experienced generals led to disastrous decisions. Skilled commanders like Heinz Guderian and Fedor von Bock had repeatedly cautioned Hitler about overstretching the German army and pleaded for strategic flexibility, including necessary tactical retreats to save troops from needless losses. But Hitler stubbornly rejected their advice, instead imposing rigid and unrealistic orders, demanding that positions be held at all costs, even when strategically pointless. As the campaign worsened, tension and distrust within the high command grew rapidly. Hitler reacted harshly, dismissing many seasoned generals who dared question his judgment. Losing these experienced leaders damaged morale, disrupted clear communication, and severely limited the army's ability to effectively respond on the battlefield, ultimately sealing the disastrous fate of Hitler's misguided campaign against the Soviet Union. What do you think was Hitler's most fatal mistake in Operation Barbarossa? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might change how others view this pivotal moment in history. In the end, Operation Barbarossa failed not due to one single mistake, but because of a series of disastrous strategic miscalculations, each compounding the effects of the others. Hitler's arrogance caused him to ignore crucial warnings from experienced military leaders, leaving him dangerously blind to the true strength of the Soviet Union. Germany's neglect of logistics meant its troops were isolated, undersupplied, and vulnerable in hostile territory. Unrealistic expectations of a quick victory quickly unraveled, crushed by the immense distances and harsh weather conditions on the Eastern Front. But most critically, Hitler gravely underestimated the fierce resolve and resilience of the Soviet people. Their determined resistance, driven by deep patriotism and a willingness to endure unimaginable suffering, ultimately shattered Hitler's dreams of conquest and dramatically altered the outcome of the Second World War. If you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe for more compelling history breakdowns.